Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy, and this is an extended edition. Extended episode number 4, Introduction to Java, Part 3. Okay, before we get into the show, I just have one quick announcement to make, and that's the new site I'm working on, XPages.tv. And this is live now, but it's not finished, and it's actually pretty ugly. But what this is going to be is a landing page for any and all X Pages related videos, whether they're training materials like Notes9 or wiki articles or product demonstrations, maybe, etc. And the goal of this page is to try and categorize, especially the educational materials, so you can easily find, well, these are the repeat controls, or these are the session scope variables, or these are the deal with Java, etc. To try and collect everything into this landing page that makes it easy for people to find what they're looking for and get up to speed. So keep your eye on that as updates will be coming over the next several weeks. Okay, on with the show. We once again have a guest speaker in the house, and that's going to be Jeremy Hodge to continue his series on Introduction to Java for the XPages developer. So, Jeremy, take it away.
Welcome to Java for XPages Developers Part 3. Today we're going to cover a couple of different topics. First, we're going to start off by reviewing a couple of things that happened in our last screencast. And then we're going to also go over some tips and tricks inside of Domino DDE to make Java development a little bit easier. And then we'll get back into some code and make some changes and increase our class's capability and functionality. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover is if you've done any development in DDE so far, you may have noticed that the application navigator can get pretty clustered unless you use working sets. The same thing can happen inside of Package Explorer. We've covered that a little bit in some of our previous videos. So I'm going to show you how to use working sets in the Package Explorer as well. So just like in your applications, you can come in here and select, for example, demo, and it will limit the applications that are seen in that view. We can do the same thing in the Package Explorer. To do this, you click up here in the menu and select your working sets, and it'll show you the same sets you've created in the application navigator, but you have to manage them separately from here, or select them separately from here. So here we also can pick demo and say OK, and you see it's limited them now to the same two applications on both sides. It makes navigating in your Java applications or your Java design elements a little bit easier. Okay, the next tip I want to give you is I want to show you how to compare two separate design elements inside of DDE so you can compare and contrast the changes to those files. It's much like diff if you're familiar with Linux or anything like that. You can run a diff on the files and see where changes have been inserted, where changes have been made, lines have been deleted, and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up two separate lines, or two separate projects inside of our Package Explorer here. And we're going to compare two elements that exist in both of these applications. So if I expand this, I look at the class, and I pick one here, and I come down here, and I've got that same class here. Select that one. Now I've hit Control on my keyboard and selected both of them. So you can see this one is highlighted, as is this one. Now I can right click on them, hit Compare With and Each Other, and it will open up here a little compare window. And you can see where it has said, okay, on the left here, this particular file has this in it, whereas it doesn't exist on the sign on the right hand side. So when we find this, we have a couple of different options. We can actually move the changes from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, or from the right-hand side to the left-hand side, by copying in those changes, as long as they don't conflict. If you've made changes to the same line and they conflict, then you have to manually resolve those. You can also do them one at a time by clicking on the individual button, so that copies the one that you currently highlighted. It'll copy that change back and forth. So in this case, I actually do not want the Java util logging on there. I don't use it in this particular class. So I can go ahead and just copy that from the right to the left. It's made the changes. It's saved them now, so we can close that, say yes. And if we were to actually compare that again now, you see it comes up with no difference between the two files. So it's a good way to kind of synchronize and keep track of your different classes. Now the compare to is not limited to just the Package Explorer. You can actually do the compare inside of the Domino or the normal DDE application navigator. The one limitation that I found there is it doesn't really do it between different applications. So if you're inside of the same file or inside the same NSF, you can do the compare, but doing it from one application to another doesn't work very well or at all. Now, there's one more thing I want to cover before we get into actually producing some more Java code. You may remember from our last screencast, we tried to set the session scope, the scope of a managed bean to view. That generated an error on the server. It said view was not a valid scope. That server was 851. With 852, the view actually is a valid scope now. So if we go to our application here inside of the Package Explorer and go back to our webinf faces config, we can put back view here for our managed bean scope instead of session. And that basically will then again limit it to the view and make it a little bit nicer to work with. You don't have to worry about clearing it out and managing that separately. Okay, so let's get back to programming our Java code for our XPages. You may remember that we're working on a Singers anthology, and we're working specifically on the Singers index form. This document, or the index entry document, basically contains information about a piece of music, who was published by, the composer, the title, and so forth. In our last video, we covered creating a class that had class members that represented each of the fields on the form. Now let's actually do some data manipulation. Let's actually create some data and save it to a Notes database and kind of see how that works together. So let's hop over to the code and get started. Okay, so here we are in our index entry class for the Singers Anthology. Here you can see we've got all of our different members declared, all of our member properties, and we've got individual getters and setters that we created for each one of those properties. Let's go ahead and talk about how we can save data and perform an action in the class from our XPage. So what we'll do is go ahead and create a method or a function in our class here that actually saves the data to the NSF. To do that, let's just come down to the bottom here. We're going to create a new function, and we'll just call it save data. And this is going to be responsible for taking whatever is currently held in the class and writing it out to the NSF. So I'm going to go ahead and put the mechanics in there, and then we'll go through and look at the code line by line and see what it does. Okay, so here we've got our save data procedure or method created, and it goes ahead and saves the data to the document inside the NSF. What we've done here basically is we've created a try-catch block that basically looks for exceptions of a particular type and then does some error checking, some error handling. In this case, we're just going to tell it to print the stack trace, which just prints on the server the error that occurred and allows us to trace out the problem and then troubleshoot it. There you could do some logging or some advanced handling to kind of take care of your solution. The next thing we're doing here is we're getting the current database that is in use. And to do that, we're actually going to use a variable resolver that takes and looks at your current context, where you're currently running in your current application, and tries to associate that data, that variable that you give it, and sends you back the object that's actually represented by that variable name. So in this case, we're actually looking to get the database variable, so we can basically work and interact with that. Later on in another part, we'll show you how to create actually what I call a JSF utilities class that allows you to get some of these functions easily and get the database, get the current session, and so forth. Below that, then we're going to go ahead and just create a new document in that database. This is all very familiar syntax, all very similar to what you would do in LotusScript server-side JavaScript, and so forth. It's the same type of Java that you would use in a Java Notes agent and so forth. So we're going to append the item value to the document. In this case, the form, and the index entry is the form name. And then each one of the fields will append those as well. And we've got the field name in quotes. And then here is the member function, or I'm sorry, the member property that contains that information that we declared earlier. So we've got up here, we've got our private string published in, which is our internal variable for holding the published date, and the published book. And then we've got our getter and our setter for setting that information. So when the JSF executes in the X page, it will retrieve it from the class using the getter, and then again save it to that class member using the set published in. And then when we actually call save data, the current state of that member property will then be saved into the field published in the document. And that's really all there is to it. We go through and set those. We call new entry.save to save the document, and it's committed to disk at that point. So let's go ahead and flip over to an X page and show you how you would call that, and then look at it in the browser. Okay, so here we are on our X page, and we're going to actually add a save button to the bottom of this. So let's go ahead and add a line there, go over to our controls tab, and just pop in that button, and we'll set some properties for that button there. So we'll come in and we'll give it a label of save data. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to make a event handler that goes ahead and calls our function on our class, our Java class, and actually saves the data. So let's hop over to the source tab on our X page and look at our button. Here we are. Let's go ahead and just clean this up here a little bit. And let's go ahead and add an event handler to that. So if we come in here and on the server side, here we pop in, we've got our event handler. If we go ahead here and say index entry dot save data, put the parentheses on it because it's a member function, and that's it. That will call the data, the save data function. Let's go ahead and save that and close that, and we'll save our Java and close that, and we'll bring up our web browser here and refresh, and here we go. Here's our save data button. So if we add some data in here, and we hit our save data button, you can see it's round trip that to the server, and it's actually saved the data. So let's go ahead and take a look at our actual NSF. And there it is. Music to code by. We've actually saved all of our information. Okay, I think that's good for this episode. We'll continue on again in the next episode. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email address is jeremy.hodges81.com, on Twitter at jeremyhodge, and either on my blog, hodgeblogs.com, or on the XPagesblog.com as well. Thanks very much, and have a good day.
And that's the demo. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Jeremy at his information that was listed. If you need anything from me, here's my information, and I thank you for your time.